Hey all, it's Blue Eyes Master 91, and today I thought I would do an Exodia deck profile along with my personal thoughts on the ban list and what I think Konami did right and what I think they did wrong. First, let's dive into the Verte ban. It's been a card that a lot of players have wanted banned since it came out, more or less. I think that it was a good call, and I don't think that uh, Verte will be back in the meta anytime soon. It was a good card, but uh, I think that it served its usefulness. As for the thoughts I have on cards that came off the list, Change of Heart, Time Seal, and Yada, I think all three of those cards are good calls to make. I don't think for a second that any of them needed to be on the ban list any longer. With Time Seal and Yada, particularly being really, really good cards for this deck profile, actually. Though I'm not running a Time Seal or a Change of Heart in it, both recently coming off the list at one, I do run a single copy of Yada. And the reason I'm using Yada and not the other two cards that came off is because while this little bird has been power crept, it is still a very, very powerful card in the correct deck. And I think that with Exodia deck's whole gimmick being stalling the opponent out while you try to gather the five pieces, I think that Yada will find a home in most Exodia or stall decks. So let's dive on in. So obviously we have our five pieces. That is something that will not change in this deck profile, and it's the staple of the deck. We do have a single copy of Yada. For those who weren't around when Yada was first released, Yada is a spirit monster, meaning that at the end of each of your turns when it's on the field, it returns to your hand. It does not stay on the field. And that is not a activated effect, that is a requirement, I believe. As for its other effect, when it attacks an opponent directly, they cannot draw the next turn. So that's why the Yada lock was so dangerous, because when paired with Chaos Emperor Dragon, it became a auto win condition outside of the Exodia cards or the Destiny board. So that's why for so long Yada was banned. Almost 20 years. Next we have 3 copies of Raw's Disciple. This is just a this is a great card in the deck because while it can be sacrificed, it does get you the ability to swarm the field with 3 monsters. So opening with a copy of Raw's Disciple is really, really useful because you get 3 monsters in place of 1. Then we have our 3 copies of Nimble Momonga. Nimble's in here because, like with Raw's Disciple, it's a search to summon 2 additional monsters. But when it gets destroyed is when the effect activates, and you also gain 1,000 life points. So setting it face down and then getting the 2 additional copies along with a total of 3,000 bonus life points is a fantastic combo. Then we have 2 copies of Witch and a single copy of Sangen. I'll zoom out. Witch and Sangen are in here just for the ability to search out the pieces of Exodia. I think that they're fantastic cards for the deck. They are extremely useful. Then we have a single copy of Skull Angel, which when it's flipped face up lets you draw a card. Flameveil Guard has 2,000 defense, so it's a nice big defensive wall. Let's slide these up. We have a single copy of Big Eye, which is a fantastic flip effect monster in its own right. When he's flipped face up, you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and rearrange them in any order you want. That is extremely powerful in an Exodia deck. We have another spirit monster in Fuchsia Notori. With Fuchsia, he also returns to your hand at the end of the turn. But when he attacks your opponent or deals damage in general, you gain that damage as life points. So a very, very good way to regain life if ever you need to desperately. We have a single copy of Kuribo just for the discarding effect to negate damage. We have Marshmallow, which is a gelatin wall, so to speak, where it cannot be destroyed by battle. We have our copy of Spirit Reaper. He can't be destroyed by battle, and if he happens to attack, you rip a random card out of your opponent's hand. So he randomly discards a card from your opponent's hand, which is very useful, though I don't see very many options on the attack. And then we have a single copy of Old Vindictive Magician, which is basically a man-eater bug. So that's it on the monsters. Let's dive into our spells. So a big change in the deck is in the spells. First, we have our copy of Mystic Mine. It's just a great card in an Exodia deck. We have our copy of Rakeki for a board wipe. Our copy of Feather Duster for back row removal. And then only one copy now of Gravekeeper Servant. The changes I mentioned are in the form of running 3 Pot of Extravagance. And this card is extremely powerful in this deck because it doesn't matter what you put in your extra deck because you're not going to use any of them. But you are going to use Pot's effect to discard 6 each time until you can't. Then we have 2 copies of our Factory of Mass Production, a single Monster Reincarnation, a single copy of Area Level Limit Area B, and then a single copy of Swords of Revealing Light. So again, this deck's whole purpose is to stall, and with cards such as Mystic Mine and Keeper Servant to not so much scare your opponent into not attacking because they don't want to lose their cards, but not wanting to attack as frequently is always useful. Obviously, some players aren't going to care one way or the other. But when it comes to other players or some players who aren't really playing a meta level deck that need every card in their deck, they're going to be very, very worried about Gravekeeper Servant and the fact that it forces them to discard the top card of their deck to the grave. So in the traps, we have a single copy of Obliterate, which lets you bounce a card back to a player's hand in exchange for discarding an Exodia piece, either from your hand or from the deck to the grave. A single copy of Drop Off, which when your opponent draws a card, you flip this up and they have to send it to the grave. We have 2 copies of Legacy of Yatagarasu. Its first effect is the only one I've ever used, which is when you flip it face up, you get to draw a card. If by chance your opponent is running spirit monsters, which more than likely they're not, if your opponent had 2 spirit monsters on the field, you could draw 2 cards instead. But odds are they're not going to have a single spirit monster, so that effect is kind of useless, and the single draw of Legacy of Yada is more than enough. We have a single copy of Mirror Force. Our Dark Factory of More Production, which allows you to send a monster from your hand or field to the graveyard to draw a card, which is really useful in this deck. Backup Soldier to recover 3 pieces of Exodia from the graveyard. We have Magic Cylinders to reflect damage back to your opponent. Gravity Bind to be more stally. And then finally Cemetery Bomb, which makes a bomb out of them having a big graveyard. So that is it for this deck profile. I will say that uh, when it comes down to it, there are other changes that could be made for this deck. You could run 2 copies of Drop Off and so on, but I think that the balance I've found with it being 2 drop offs, or 1 drop off, sorry, is more than enough. You could also run a 3rd copy of Legacy of Yada if you really wanted to. But with all the additional draw power in this deck, with the 3 copies of Extravagance, I don't think you'd need more draw power. I will quickly go over what I threw in the extra deck just because they were just cards lying around that I could use. Skull Knight, Fossil Warrior Skull Knight, Fossil Machine Skull Wagon, copy of Trish, Blackwing Dragon, Stardust Spark, Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, Hot Dragon Archfiend King Calamity, a copy of Black Rose Dragon, a copy of Vermilion. We have Bryonic, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, Wind Pegasus, Tornado Dragon, number 62. We have Gravity Controller and Link Karibo. None of which you could actually use aside from maybe Tornado Dragon. Link Karibo would be another one you could probably go into relatively easily, as well as your copy of Blackwing Dragon and Rose Dragon, since they're both level 7. Even Wind Pegasus you could go into if needed, but you're better off just using the entirety of the extra deck as Extravagant Spotter to draw the maximum number of cards with the spell. But yeah, that is it for this deck profile. If you guys liked the video, go ahead go ahead and subscribe as well if you want, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.